Hell hath no fury like a woman scorned. But is that the whole story? Or are these female killers truly evil? In this video, we'll see for ourselves as we watch the intense reactions of these killers when they hear the harsh reality of their sentences. What was supposed to be a carjacking crime and nothing more turned deadly in Daytona, Florida. Keandria Cook was 18 years old when she committed a crime that would change her life forever. Cook had been dating her boyfriend, Kendrick Bass, for a while before he proposed a business opportunity to help them get money faster. Cook agreed to this, and they began devising a plan. On March 22, 2017, Keandria Cook went on the Meet Me social app and started talking to 28-year-old Perry Nita. Cook then lured Perry from Palm Coast to South Daytona with talks of sex and marijuana. Nita agreed to meet with Cook and told her he was on his way. He invited 18-year-old Emmanuel Purcell to ride along with him. When they got to the location, they met Cook as she promised, and she got into the pickup truck with Nita and Purcell. After she entered the pickup, Bass waited for a while before he jumped in the back seat with a gun. When Purcell noticed this, he pushed Bass, who shot Purcell before he and Cook escaped. Purcell survived and soon talked to the police about what had happened. 2 days after this happened, Cook and Bass teamed up for another carjacking. It was at the time that Cook was arrested. Bass, on the other hand, ran away and would go on to evade police for 10 months. Meanwhile, Keandria was arrested and charged under the impression that she would not be sent to jail. Regardless, she was charged with conspiracy, carjacking, attempted carjacking with a deadly weapon, and felony battery. The conspiracy charge meant that Keandria could be sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Because of miscommunication with her lawyer, Keandria and her mother were assured that she would not be going to prison if she took a plea deal. Her attorney told her to enter a no-contest plea to get the conspiracy charge dropped. If she pleaded no contest to principal to carjacking with a deadly weapon, principal to attempted carjacking with a deadly weapon, and principal to aggravated battery with a deadly weapon, she would get probation and not go to jail. Or at least that's what she thought. Following the advice of her attorney, Keandria pleaded no contest and appeared in court with the belief that it was just a formality. Keandria and her mother were shocked when Circuit Judge Matt Foxman sentenced Keandria to 20 years in prison, with 20 years of probation to run concurrent with her jail time. Hearing this, Keandria and her mother began to wail very loudly. This courtroom footage quickly went viral and gained millions of views from netizens. Many people who read the story were quick to point out that it was the fault of the public defender who initially argued her case. Cook was wailing before she broke down and had to be carried out of the courtroom. She reportedly passed out. During the next court appearance, Judge Foxman allowed Cook to withdraw her plea deal after she provided a recording where her former attorney assured her that she would not be going to jail. Her sentence was also thrown out, and she was allowed to start the sentencing afresh in 2018. This time around, Cook didn't cry because she knew what she was getting herself into. She entered into a no-contest plea again, and this time she was sentenced to 11 years in prison, with 20 years of probation to run concurrent with her jail term.
I just want to say that I'm sorry for the things wrong, that her son had to get shot, because I didn't even know he was going to get shot.
Before she was escorted away, she apologized to the family of the victim, telling them that she didn't mean for their son to get shot. Keandria Cook will be free from prison in 2029. Kendrick Bass, on the other hand, was eventually caught 10 months later for an unrelated crime. Concerning the crime he committed together with Cook, he was sentenced to 20 years in prison. Keandria Cook conspired to rob someone, and this almost led to murder. But how does it compare to the horrific crime of beating a toddler to death over a potty accident? How bad of a mess can a toddler make to make it justifiable to beat her to death? Well, for 25-year-old Erica Butts and Shanita Cunningham, all the toddler had to do was urinate on the floor. In 2009, Leisha Richardson took her 3-year-old daughter Serenity Richardson to visit her godmother. Erica Butts was Serenity's godmother and Leisha's best friend since childhood. Erica lived in Somerville, North Carolina with her lover, Shanita Cunningham. Serenity was supposed to be at Butts' home for 2 weeks. Little did Leisha know that this was the last time she would see her daughter alive. Serenity had a potty accident in their home while she was staying there. She had urinated on the floor. Because of this, Erica and Shanita beat Serenity with a belt and multiple plastic coat hangers. The two of them continued to beat her until Serenity became unresponsive. When the two of them noticed this, they put bleach under her nose in an attempt to revive her. When she did not respond, they put her body on ice. After they tried everything they could to no avail, Butts called her mother, who called 911. The sight that the medics were met with was horrible. They reported that every inch of Serenity's body was covered in bruises and strikes from the belt. According to the prosecutor, no area of Serenity was unharmed except for the soles of her feet. There were multiple cuts over her chest, stomach, legs and arms, back and head. Serenity was pronounced dead and the women were arrested.
The severity of the blow to that child's leg, and to say that you did not recognize what had been done, to ignore what must have been the excruciating sounds that came from that child on a daily basis, is more than disconcerting to this court.
In court, the two women gave the most disgusting argument possible. The judge who was presiding was dismayed and disturbed by this. They claimed that they didn't know that beating Serenity was going to kill her. During the court hearing, the judge dismissed their argument, saying it's impossible to ignore the cries of pain coming from Serenity. Erica insisted that she was innocent and didn't kill Serenity. She admitted to beating her with the belt, but said that she didn't kill her. Shanita's lawyer said that Erica was aggressive and that she had most of the blame. The judge in charge of the case, Deandra Richardson, wasn't interested in their blame trade. Shanita pled guilty to the charges, but Erica maintained her innocence. Despite this, the two of them were sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. When they heard this, the two of them collapsed on the floor in the courtroom. Erica's mother also began screaming and had to be escorted out of the courtroom as well. The two convicts were wheeled away to start their sentences. Where Erica and Shanita actively murdered Serenity, how does it compare to a mother who locked her daughter at home alone for 10 days while she was halfway across the continent? The Cuyahoga County in Ohio, Cleveland, experienced something so devastating that many people can't wrap their heads around it. The woman you just saw being sentenced is 31-year-old Crystal Candelario. Crystal is facing charges of aggravated murder and endangerment of children. In June 2023, Crystal left her 16-month-old daughter in a playpen and walked out of the door. Jalen Candelario was left with a few bottles of milk in the playpen before Crystal, her mother, went on a 10-day vacation to Puerto Rico. Crystal toured the streets of the Caribbean with a male friend at night and enjoyed the sunny beach by day. She then went on to travel to Detroit and spent the last of her vacation there. All this while Jalen Candelario was fighting for her last breath after severe dehydration and hunger. Neighbors said they could hear the child screaming and crying around 1 a.m. after her mother left. Nobody came to her rescue. Candelario returned on June 16th, 10 days later. When she entered her house, she was met with a horrific sight. The lifeless body of Jalen was in the playpen. She had died without anyone to help her. With panic, Crystal called 911. Even though she was panicked, Crystal still tried to hide her crime.
So at autopsy, I examined the body of a very emaciated female toddler. At this point, she weighed 13 pounds. Upon review of medical records, this indicated approximately a 7-pound weight loss since her previous doctor's visit less than 2 months prior to that.
Before first responders arrived at the scene, Crystal dressed Jalen in a clean outfit, trying to hide the horrors that the baby had gone through before she died. Jalen was in a playpen covered with urine and feces. She was severely dehydrated and had shrunk drastically. Her eyes were sunken, she had dry lips, and there was human waste in her mouth and fingernails. At the time of her death, Jalen weighed 7 pounds less than she had 2 months earlier. She had lost 7 pounds from neglect, hunger, and thirst. Even though Crystal was reportedly crying, her story quickly fell through, and she was arrested. Crystal was soon charged with 1 count of aggravated murder and 1 count of child endangering.
But when we started digging deeper into the investigation, it was beyond horrific. It was revealed that the defendant, Crystal Candelario,
alone, unprotected, to suffer What I heard was the most gruesome death imaginable.
We're now hearing from Crystal Candelario herself, the day her daughter was pronounced dead.
At her sentencing, law officials could not hold back their tears as they recounted what Joleen faced in her final days. The forensic pathologist on the case tried to hold her tears back when she gave her statement. She was reported saying the pain and suffering she endured lasted not only hours, not days, but possibly even a week. This feeling of abandonment for days on end, coupled with the pain of starvation and extreme thirst, is a type of suffering I don't think any of us could ever fully fathom. The police officer in charge of the case didn't do so well with holding her tears when she talked about what they witnessed. Police Sergeant Teresa Gomez cried as she told the court that this was a case that they would never forget.
Estoy muy dolida por todo lo que pasó.
I'm extremely hurt about everything that happened.
No estoy tratando de justificar mis actos,
I am not trying to justify my actions,
pero nadie sabe cuánto yo estaba sufriendo.
but nobody knew how much I was suffering
Y por lo que estaba pasando.
and what I was going through.
Crystal was also given her chance to talk, and she apologized for what she had done. She spoke through an interpreter and told the court that what she did wasn't intentional. She blamed it on mental illness, particularly depression and anxiety. Candelario was in tears as she told the court that nobody knew what she was going through. She also said that the journey was on impulse. She said that she had simply grabbed a suitcase that had been packed months earlier and left the house without looking back. After she said her piece, Judge Brandon D. Sheehan admonished Crystal as he handed down her sentence. He said that since she trapped Joleen in a tiny cell without freedom till she died, she would get the same sentence. Ultimately, Crystal was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. Crystal Candelario's case is similar to that of Sarah Boone, only Sarah zipped up her boyfriend in a suitcase and left him there to die.
Were you in fear?
Always.
If he would have gotten out of the suitcase, what would he have done to you?
Like he used to tell me, he probably would have made me unrecognizable, or I would have lost my life.
In February 2020, 42-year-old George Torres suffocated to death after he was zipped into a suitcase. His girlfriend, also 42 years old, Sarah Boone, was arrested the next day and charged with second-degree murder. Before George died, he had a history of being violent towards Sarah Boone. He was arrested more than 10 times for assaulting Boone, yet every time Sarah bailed him out. On February 24, 2020, Sarah called 911 and told them Torres was dead. She said that they had been playing hide-and-seek when they thought it would be funny to see if George would fit inside a suitcase. Before this, they shared a bottle of wine and were tipsy. George got into the suitcase and Sarah zipped him up. She then went upstairs, accidentally fell asleep, and forgot that Torres was in the suitcase. When she woke up, he was dead. That was what she claimed happened. During the investigation, Sarah was very cooperative and even handed her phone over to investigators. They found 2 disturbing videos that suggested that Sarah was not being truthful. Allegedly, one of the videos showed Boone laughing as Torres begged her to let him out. Instead, she laughed and said, "That's what you do when you choke me. And that's what I feel like when you cheat on me." When she was asked, she said she didn't remember the videos.
I zipped him up. We thought it was funny, and we're joking about how he was, I guess, small enough to fit inside of the suitcase.
When Sarah went to court, she recounted the details as she remembered it. She said that they had laughed about how small he was. Sarah was incredibly difficult to work with as well. 8 different attorneys were appointed by the state, and all 8 of them withdrew. After this, the judge ruled that Sarah had forfeited her right to court-appointed counsel. Sarah represented herself until July 2024, when she submitted a letter that said she was looking for a lawyer. James Owens represented her and tried to get a plea agreement for manslaughter. However, Sarah Boone rejected this.
Were you in fear?
Always.
If he would have gotten out of the suitcase, what would he have done to you?
Like he used to tell me, he probably would have made me unrecognizable, or I would have lost my life.
She told the court that she didn't intend to kill him and that she was innocent. Eventually, the defense argued that Boone suffered from battered woman syndrome. Sarah went on to talk about how she was sometimes scared of George, especially when he was drunk or high. She said that this was when he would get violent towards her. She said that at that moment, when he was locked in the suitcase, she wanted him to feel a little discomfort compared to what she felt from him constantly. Despite the arguments that Sarah made, she was found guilty of second-degree murder. She will be sentenced on December 2, 2024. We now turn to the haunting story of Michelle Blair.
Can you talk me through the type of abuse that you had to suffer as a kid?
You mean sexual abuse?
If that's what happened?
That definitely did happen to me. That's why I know exactly how would have grew up.
Gabby Blair, daughter of Michelle Blair, described her mom as a ticking time bomb, always ready to explode at the slightest provocation. According to Gabby, Michelle had a short fuse, and any touch or slight provocation would set her off. As the siblings grew older, the mistreatment they endured from their mother intensified. Mentally, verbally, and physically, Gabby and her siblings were subjected to an increasingly severe form of punishment, which depended on Michelle's mood.
Defendants charged in count 1 homicide, murder, first degree premeditated. Count 2 homicide, murder, first degree premeditated. Count 3 felony murder. Count 4 felony murder.
According to Gabby, Michelle regularly used extension cords and belts to beat her and her siblings. The violence escalated in August 2012 when Michelle became convinced that her 9-year-old son, Stephen Barry, was assaulting his other siblings. In a desperate attempt to uncover the truth, Michelle embarked on an interrogation of her younger children, who denied any wrongdoing. However, under relentless questioning, Gabby and her siblings eventually confessed that Stephen had assaulted them.
She said he died about a week later and that it was witnessed by 2 kids.
Armed with the confirmation of abuse from her younger children, Michelle embarked on a path of unimaginable horror. She retrieved an extension cord and started to strangle her 9-year-old son with the cord so tight that she lifted him off the ground. Over the next few days, the abuse of Stephen continued, with Michelle denying him food, putting him in a plastic bag, and torturing him until he died. After Stephen's death, Gabby was forced to take part in her mother's horrendous plan.
Can you imagine?
Talking about
You want to talk about your surviving children, though, Michelle? You didn't ever consider turning yourself in?
If my son told me.
Michelle ordered Gabby to store her brother's body in the freezer. Gabby later described her life as a never-ending nightmare, haunted by the knowledge that her brother lay lifeless in the freezer. She described living in constant fear of her mother, always being cautious about what she said around her, as she was terrified of the consequences of speaking out.
In her confession, she says she killed 15-year-old Stony Ann Blair and 8-year-old Stephen Barry because they were harming her youngest son.
With Michelle's son, Stephen, out of the picture, her paranoia reached new heights. She started to focus her attention on Stony Blair, her 13-year-old daughter. Michelle was convinced that Stony had assaulted the younger children in the home.
All right, Ms. Blair, we're here today because you've indicated that you want to plead guilty to 2 of the counts that are identified in the information, since much of today's proceeding will be...
Michelle repeatedly asked her youngest son if Stony had harmed him, and he lied out of fear, saying yes. However, in reality, Stony had not done anything. Despite the lack of evidence, Michelle's paranoia fueled her belief that Stony posed a threat to her family.
Right up under my nose. So, man, I don't regret none of this. I don't regret any of it. It's my son. That's my baby. It's no way.
In May 2013, Michelle took matters into her own hands. She hit Stony in the head with a 2x4, causing severe injuries. She then proceeded to strangle Stony with a shirt while Stony was still alive. Michelle forced Gabby to assist in placing the teenager's body in the freezer. Michelle then threatened Gabby, saying she would first kill Gabby's only surviving brother, and then Gabby and herself if Gabby told anyone about what happened to Stony and Stephen.
In her confession, she says she killed 15-year-old Stony Ann Blair and 8-year-old Stephen Barry because they were harming her youngest son since he was in diapers.
2 years later, Michelle was evicted from the home for failure to pay rent. When an eviction crew arrived to get Michelle and her children out of the house, they made a horrifying discovery. They found Stony and Stephen's frozen bodies in the freezer.
First degree committed in the presence of another child. Appearances for the record, please.
Good
morning.
Good morning, Your Honor. Wyatt Harris on behalf.
Michelle Blair was arrested and charged with 2 counts of felony murder, premeditated murder, and torture. Several months after, Michelle pleaded guilty and was sentenced to life without the possibility of parole. During the sentencing hearing, Michelle expressed her willingness to accept the death penalty if Michigan were to offer it. However, the judge was quick to point out that she had already imposed the death penalty on her children, to which Michelle replied, "I did."
Both fathers failed to support, care for their children for 2 years, at least 2 years. And for them to now come before this court and say we should be entitled to unsupervised.
Before the judge handed down the sentence, Michelle could address the court. Instead of taking responsibility for her actions, she shifted the blame to the fathers of her 4 children, claiming they had played no role in their lives. Her defense attempted to mitigate the circumstances of Michelle's conviction by highlighting that she had little education before becoming a mother herself.
They were aware of abuse in 2002 and 2005.
Michelle's demeanor throughout the trial painted a picture of a cold, calculating individual. She showed virtually no remorse for the crimes she had committed, referring to her dead children as demons and displacing an eerie detachment from her actions. When addressing the judge, Michelle unapologetically asserted that she never lied about anything and was perfectly fine in her twisted way. Moving from the disturbing reality of Michelle Blair's case, we now confront the unsettling story of Diana Lovejoy.
K. McDavid, guilty of the crime of conspiracy to commit murder.
Diana Lovejoy, a fitness instructor and YouTuber, was in a strained relationship with her ex-husband, Greg Mulvihill. As the pair battled over details concerning their contentious divorce, including the custody of their young son. Lovejoy, born on the 26th of October 1972, had dated Mulvihill for a year before the couple got married in 2007. However, the marriage faced problems right from the start, as Lovejoy suffered numerous miscarriages before she finally had a son. And within 7 years of their marriage, Lovejoy had filed for divorce. The long court case following the divorce filing only strained the relationship between the couple further, as the initial full custody and child support benefits granted to Lovejoy for their then 3-year-old son was changed for the couple to share instead. Lovejoy was also required to pay Mulvihill $120,000 as she kept their family house in Carlsbad, California. Lovejoy did pay Mulvihill the required sum, but she never wanted to share custody of her only child, so, in a surprising twist, she hatched a sinister plan to execute her ex-husband. On the 4th of September 2016, Mulvihill received a call from someone pretending to be a private investigator who threatened him with alleged evidence of his mistreatment towards his wife, which could be used against him in court. The caller was able to convince Mulvihill to go to a remote location near Rancho Santa Fe to collect the evidence. And on reaching there with his friend Jason around 11 p.m., Mulvihill was shot in his side after spotting someone in the bushes. However, the bullet missed his heart and he was able to survive the shooting. Investigations into the attempted murder were conducted, and it was quickly concluded from the evidence found, such as cell tower data, that Lovejoy had been involved in the attempted murder. The man behind the gun was also discovered to be former Marine, as well as Lovejoy's gun instructor and lover, Weldon McDavid, who had made a run for it after his failed attempt. The AR-15 rifle he used was later found in his garage. After the pair were arrested a week later, it was revealed that Lovejoy had paid McDavid $2,000 to assassinate her ex-husband to get him out of the picture with concerns over their son. During a court hearing, Lovejoy alleged that Mulvihill had mistreated her and her young son. However, both Mulvihill and the prosecutors disapproved of the claims. Investigators discovered surveillance footage of Lovejoy from less than a month before the attempted murder, where she purchased the burner phone which McDavid had used to call Mulvihill on that fateful night. And on the 13th of November 2016, a jury found Lovejoy and McDavid guilty of attempted murder and conspiracy to commit murder. Video footage captured from the courtroom showed Lovejoy's unexpected reaction when the verdict on her charges was pronounced. Immediately, the guilty verdict was read. Lovejoy, who had been staring blankly ahead while sitting beside her attorney, suddenly slumped as her head hit the desk. There were murmurs of both shock and concern around the courtroom, as it had appeared that Lovejoy had gone unconscious. Court officers had to rush to lay her on the floor before she was eventually rushed to the hospital, where it was confirmed that she had fainted. Lovejoy was eventually sentenced in December to 26 years in prison, while McDavid received a 50-year sentence for being the one who pulled the trigger on Lovejoy's husband. As we shift from the harrowing tale of Diana Lovejoy, we find ourselves facing the chilling story of Kamama Gamut.
Relentless, you stab, you stab, you stab, you stab, you stab until he was dead.
In 2013, Kamama Gamut was living with her 38-year-old boyfriend, Marcel Hill, in Jackson, Mississippi. The pair had opposing personalities, as Marcel, who suffered with multiple mental and physical disabilities, was described to be a friendly, childlike man and worked at a fast food joint. On the other hand, Gamut, who had a difficult childhood living in 13 different foster homes, was known to be a substance user who had an abusive nature and a tendency for violent outbursts. Gamut had previously been arrested for assaulting an ex-boyfriend and would bring the same mistreatment behavior to her relationship with Hill, often bullying and seriously assaulting him. One time, Gamut stabbed Hill with a knife and stitched up the wound afterwards. She also punctured his lung in another assault incident. And in a third incident, she hit him in the head with a hammer. On all 3 occasions, Hill chose not to report Gamut to the authorities, and he wouldn't live to rue his inactions. On the 18th of May, 2013, Gamut and Hill got into a brutal physical fight where, in a fit of rage, Gamut absolutely violated Hill, bludgeoning and stabbing him multiple times with a knife and frying pan till he was unconscious and cutting the torso of his dead body open. Hearing the racket coming from their home, a neighbor called 911, and when police arrived, they were met with a house in complete disarray. Furniture had been smashed. The knife and frying pan, as well as Gamut, were covered in Hill's blood. Hill had been stabbed 11 times, but remarkably, Gamut had sustained no injuries and was only slurring her speech after she was found. Gamut was swiftly arrested, but claimed to authorities that she had been asleep in the living room when someone had repeatedly hit her over the head, which led her to defend herself from the unidentified attacker before she eventually realized that it was her boyfriend. During the court hearing in March 2014, Gamut's claims were easily dismissed due to the many holes in her story. On the 16th of April 2014, Gamut was found guilty of the charges and sentenced by a Jackson County Circuit judge to a life in prison without the possibility of parole. However, Gamut's reaction to the sentencing would spark a series of outbursts in the court, especially from the judge. Before the verdict was pronounced, Gamut showed no signs of remorse, merely rolling her eyes and laughing as Hill's family read out an emotional letter to her. The presiding judge reacted to this by saying he hoped Gamut died in prison, and that if Mississippi was a death penalty state, she would have been handed the electric chair. Just when you think Kamama Gamut's actions are as dark as it gets, brace yourself for Taylor Shabusiness.
Stop it.
The woman you just saw is Taylor Shabusiness. On February 23, 2022, the dismembered head of a 24-year-old American named Shad Therian was found in a bucket by his mother in Green Bay, Wisconsin. His mother, Tara Pakanich, called the police and they discovered several bisected body parts in different locations. The perpetrator? Taylor Shabusiness. Therian and Shabusiness had been involved in a relationship for a while, and 2 days before parts of Therian was found, Taylor had picked him up from his mother's house. She took him to another apartment where they had met up with a friend and ingested quantities of hard substances. Shortly after, they were under the influence, so they went back to Therian's apartment. When they arrived, they got intimate in the basement. Tara Pakanich had been out with her boyfriend when her son and Taylor arrived in the house. However, during this process, Taylor strangled Therian until he started to cough up blood and didn't stop until he gave up. She killed Therian with a metal chain before dismembering his body and putting his head in his mother's basement. She also removed Therian's organs and parts and put them in plastic bags, cardboard boxes, and a storage tote. The particular murder was so gruesome that it is still being talked about. If what Shabusiness did to Therian when he was alive was horrifying, it was later revealed that what she did to him afterwards was even worse.
But when did you start, cutting up his body?
Like almost right away. I was sucking and cutting at the same time.
Shabusiness mistreated Therian's body for hours after he died. She sexually assaulted him and mutilated his body with intimate objects after being intimate with the body herself. She admitted this with no ounce of remorse in her behavior, but this was not even enough. Shabusiness appeared in court after she was arrested 3 months later by the police when they found the missing remains of Therian in her minivan. She was charged with intentional homicide, third-degree sexual assault, and mutilation of a corpse, among other counts. Investigation revealed that Taylor Shabusiness had drawn inspiration from the infamous serial killer, Jeffrey Dahmer, who had ritualistic habits when he murdered his victims.
You meet the same fate as your idolistic Jeffrey Dahmer. So have a good life, Shabusiness.
Taylor claimed that after she dismembered Therian, she drained his blood into the bathtub and took a shower with it. This particularly horrifying revelation shocked the interrogator to the core. Eventually, it was time for Shabusiness to defend her position. However, she had other plans.
Stop it.
During this court appearance on February 23rd, Shabusiness suddenly attacked her lawyer, shocking everyone who was in the courtroom at the time. She hit him in the face before the lawyer fended her off himself, before the officers in the courtroom tried to subdue her. 6 months before this, on September 1st, 2022, the lawyer Shabusiness attacked, Quinn Jolly, had submitted a plea of not guilty by insanity due to the nature of Shabusiness's actions. It seemed that the reason Taylor attacked her attorney in the first place was because Quinn had requested that the trial date be moved back a little. After this incident, however, Quinn told Judge Thomas Walsh that he planned to remove himself from the case after that session. After this outburst and sudden attack from Shabusiness, her future appearances in court showed her wearing a spit guard due to her unpredictable actions. In one of these sessions, Shad Therian's uncle told Shabusiness that what she did was horrible and it was a consequence of her refusing to get help for her condition.
You know, there's help out there. And if you take the path to go get the help, you wouldn't be in this situation right now. None of us would be in this situation. But to take the cowardly path that you did and to make other people suffer because you were suffering is pretty shitty.
Michael Therian.
Okay, go ahead.
Taylor, I just wanted to say that I forgive you for what you done to my son. Yeah, you made a bad choice, and now you have to live with it. And like I said, I forgive you, and I'm going to ask the judge if he can, if she can see the streets again sometime,
Shabusiness showed no remorse for anything she had done and was seen smirking on multiple occasions. Judge Walsh didn't think this was right or even permitted in any way, because what Taylor did was so terrifying that the judge said that it offended human decency. The jury took only 30 minutes to decide on their verdicts, and they found Shabusiness guilty of all charges. Even though Shabusiness's new attorney had insisted on a plea of not guilty on the basis of insanity, the jury said that the murder was premeditated and calculated. Shabusiness was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole, and she showed little to no emotion as her sentence was read to her. We now turn our attention to Shayna Hubers, a young woman whose tumultuous relationship ended in a shocking act of violence.
Has led to her shooting Ryan Poston to death in 2012.
Snapped my neck because of the way that he was jerking my head around.
Ryan Poston was an intelligent young man who majored in history, geography, and political science at Indiana University before attending law school at Northern Kentucky University. After graduating, Ryan embarked on a successful career as an attorney in Cincinnati, Ohio. During this phase, he crossed paths with Shayna Hubers, a 20-year-old woman with whom he embarked on a tumultuous relationship.
Bolte, you are Miss Ohio.
She's Miss Ohio 2012.
The 3 women remain, only
one of the final 3 at the Miss USA pageant.
Over the next 18 months, Ryan and Shayna broke up nearly a dozen times. Despite their differences, they continued to be drawn back together, driven by an inexplicable force. On October 12, 2012, Ryan and Shayna found themselves in an off period of their relationship. Ryan, in fact, had plans to go on a date with the Miss Ohio USA 2012 winner that night. Little did he know that his life would soon be cut short. Later that night, Shayna called 911 from Ryan's apartment, telling the dispatcher that she had shot and killed him. The dispatcher immediately dispatched police and paramedics to the scene, where they found Ryan's lifeless body lying in a pool of blood. After her arrest, Shayna was interviewed by detectives, where she made several disturbing statements. She called Ryan very vain, seemingly attempting to shift blame onto him. Further, she expressed doubts that anyone would want to marry her after knowing she had shot him in self-defense. During the interrogation, Shayna's behavior became increasingly erratic when she was left alone. Shayna began dancing and singing Amazing Grace, seemingly oblivious to the seriousness of her situation. She even confessed, saying, "I did it. Yes, I did it. I can't believe I did that."
Not a murderer at all. Now, the past several days, the Commonwealth attorney has been calling witness after witness, many testifying that Hubers intentionally killed.
Shayna was charged with first-degree murder. Her bail was set at a staggering $5 million, ensuring she would remain in custody until her trial. In 2015, Shayna's trial began, lasting 2 weeks and culminating with the jury deliberating for 5 hours before delivering a guilty verdict. However, the defense would later uncover that a juror who sat on her trial was a felon, casting doubts on the fairness of the verdict. As a result, the ruling was overturned and Shayna was granted a new trial.
Will try to once again prove Hubers murdered her ex-boyfriend Ryan Poston. Huber says it was an act of self-defense when she shot Poston in his Highland Heights condo.
In 2018, Shayna faced trial for the second time in connection to the tragic murder of her boyfriend, Ryan Poston. This trial brought attention to the relationship between Shayna and Ryan, which delved into explicit details of their romantic life. The defense argued that Ryan's behavior towards Shayna was like a yo-yo, pushing her away and then pulling her back, causing confusion and mixed messages. However, the prosecution presented a compelling argument, reminding jurors that it was Shayna who closed the distance between them and fired the initial shot, ultimately choosing to shoot him in the head 5 more times.
We believe was a family member or a friend. Opening statements were made this morning in which the prosecution said that Shayna Hubers was a cold, calculating woman.
According to the prosecutors, Shayna was relentless in her pursuit of Ryan. They presented evidence showing that she texted and called him excessively. Furthermore, during the interrogation process, Shayna was recorded saying, "I'm good at acting." This statement raised suspicions among the prosecution, as they believed she was putting on a facade to deceive the police.
We, the jury, find the defendant guilty of murder.
Guilty! The woman who shot her boyfriend because he was about to ditch her for a Miss USA contest.
After the jury left to deliberate, it ultimately took 5 hours for them to once again find Shayna guilty of Ryan's murder. As the guilty verdict was read, Shayna leaned forward, buried her face in her attorney's lap, and cried. During the sentencing phase, the judge told Shayna that her actions were grossly violent and intentionally calculated. This assessment led him to conclude that a life sentence was the most appropriate punishment.
The jury found that you intentionally murdered Ryan Poston. You picked up Mr. Poston's gun from the kitchen table and shot him 6 times.
As Judge Zala handed down the sentence, the courtroom remained silent. Shayna maintained an emotionless expression, seemingly unaffected by the gravity of the situation. In an attempt to sway the judge, Shayna's attorney requested a mistrial. However, the judge denied the motion. In the next case, we'll delve into the chilling tale of Dynell Lane, a heinous female murderer who committed a truly unimaginable act.
She's spoken publicly about what happened on that day in March just once. She said that when Lane started attacking her, she told her that she loved her, hoping that she might stop. Wilkins says Lane responded, "If you love me, you will let me do this."
On March 18, 2018, Michelle Wilkins, 7 months pregnant, responded to a Craigslist advertisement for baby clothes. Michelle had no way of knowing that her encounter with Dynell Lane, a 35-year-old woman, would turn into a horrifying nightmare. Dynell Lane invited Michelle into her home under the guise of selling baby clothes. However, when Michelle arrived, she discovered that Dynell had other intentions.
After the verdict, Michelle Wilkins sat in a quiet room and reflected on the most difficult time of her life.
I forgive her whether she asked my forgiveness or not.
She also shared a tragically personal moment.
Dynell led Michelle down to the basement where her sinister plan unfolded. In the basement, Dynell, armed with a lava lamp, violently assaulted Michelle. She hit Michelle in the head, leaving her disoriented. Escalating the situation, Dynell used a piece of broken glass to stab Michelle in the neck. With Michelle helpless on the ground, Dynell, in a twisted act of violence, cut open Michelle's stomach and removed the unborn baby girl from her uterus.
I did all the things that, a mom would want to do. I read to her, I dressed her, but not being able to witness her first breath.
After cutting baby Aurora from her mother's womb, Dynell left Michelle to bleed out in the basement. Dynell's husband, David Ridley, arrived home from work. When he arrived, he found Dynell covered in blood.
And they go back into this bedroom. This is their room number 10. And let me tell you what happened.
Dynell, in a panicked state, told David that she had a miscarriage in the upstairs bathtub. David and Dynell rushed the baby girl to the hospital, hoping to save her life. Unfortunately, the baby did not survive.
So the record will be clear. I'll try to ask you specific questions, and you can answer them best you can. So you then went downstairs with the defendant?
Yeah.
Michelle Wilkins miraculously survived the assault and was taken to the hospital herself. When Michelle was receiving treatment, the doctors became suspicious of Dynell's story. The doctors noticed that she showed no signs of having just given birth, leading them to question her account.
Now this is one of those questions of why. Who knows why? David Ridley told you he didn't want kids. You know that Miss Lane had 2 other children of her own.
Soon, the truth began to unfold. It was revealed that Dynel had lied to her husband and children for months about being pregnant. She had created a ruse to make everyone believe that she was having a baby, even going as far as posting fake ultrasound photos on social media.
Now this is one of those questions of why. Who knows why? David Ridley told you he didn't want kids. You know that Miss Lane had 2 other children of her own. Why did she fake this pregnancy? We don't know.
However, as Dynel's fake due date approached, she found herself in need of a baby. Desperate to fill her desires, she created an ad online and lured an unsuspecting pregnant woman to her home. Her goal was to steal the baby and continue her facade of being pregnant.
As we get into things starting today, of course, jury selection begins and 300 potential jurors will be summoned. Of course, that will be narrowed down to just a few.
Dynel was charged with attempted first-degree murder, 2 counts of first-degree assault, 2 counts of second-degree assault, and unlawful termination of a pregnancy. She was unable to be charged with the baby's death due to Colorado law. Despite this technicality, the jurors still convicted Dynel on all charges, and the judge sentenced her to 100 years in prison.
Lane, in prior court appearances, she remains in custody at the Boulder County Jail on $2 million bond, and if she gets convicted...
Throughout the trial, Dynel maintained a stoic demeanor, showing no emotion as the case details unfolded. However, upon hearing the judge's sentencing, Dynel broke down in tears. One of the trial's most compelling moments came when an interview tape was played for the jury.
Lane admitted to strangling Wilkins, then she admitted to cutting out Wilkins' baby. Listen.
I got the knife that she had.
In this tape, Dynel claimed that Michelle possessed the knife during the altercation. Although this statement was refuted by other evidence, it seemed to elicit a reaction from Dynel, as she could be seen crying during the playback. While Dynel herself chose not to testify, her friends and family felt the emotional impact of her case deeply. They spoke on her behalf, sharing stories of a loving and compassionate woman they knew.
I choose to use my time to address you directly, Dynel, because up to this very moment you have refused to acknowledge us, the victims of your violent actions.
During the trial, Michelle had the opportunity to confront Dynel head-on, delivering a powerful statement. Holding a large picture of her daughter, Aurora, Michelle addressed the defendant, saying, "You'd knowingly left me to die multiple times. The only tears you shed during the trial were those of self-pity, to the sound of your voice as your lies were slowly revealed."
Anger was valid, and I also felt the compassion, and I reached a comfortable place where I could experience both of those.
That is Michelle Wilkins.
Michelle emphasized her desire for justice, advocating for a maximum sentence for Dynel. She believed such a sentence would allow Dynel time to atone, reflect, and meditate with prayer and action. Her intention was for Dynel to truly understand the gravity of her actions and their impact on everyone involved. We now encounter the perplexing story of Kimberly Kessler. Kessler's case is one that raises numerous questions about identity, trust, and the dark corners of human behavior. 34-year-old Joleen Rebecca Cummings was a single mother of 3, working as a hairstylist at a local salon in Yulee, Florida, in May 2018. Her friend, Brooke Harley, reminisced how she met her in high school and had been friends with her ever since. She said Joleen was vivacious. People wanted to be around her. She was a very giving, loving person. She was amazing. According to Brooke, Joleen graduated in 2002 and got pregnant shortly after. Though young, the latter was confident she would be a good mother.
Brooke says Joleen was the kind of friend that would stick up for you.
She'd always be like, "Why are you letting them talk to you like that or do that to you? Like, you can't do that."
When Joleen's relationship with her daughter's father did not work out, she moved to Jacksonville with her child and enrolled in cosmetology school. Joleen's mother, Ann Johnson, recounted how her daughter was ecstatic about getting the job and was slowly building her clientele. On May 13th, 2018, it was Mother's Day and Joleen's birthday. Ann stated her daughter always bought her flowers on that day. When Jason pulled into the driveway around 6 p.m. and said Joleen did not meet him in Hillard as per their predetermined arrangement to pick up the children, Ann started getting worried. Jason said, "I would have heard from her. Her daughter definitely would have heard from her." Ann knew something was wrong when Joleen did not pick up her calls and contacted the Fernandina Beach Police Department to file a missing person report. The 34-year-old was last noticed leaving her workplace around 5 p.m. on May 12th and was never seen again. According to the authorities, she has been murdered, but her remains have not been found to date. The police suspected her body was dismembered and secretly disposed of. The investigators decided to build a timeline leading up to Joleen's disappearance and contacted the owners of the Tangles hair salon to learn she had been tasked to close up the salon on May 12th at 5 p.m. Furthermore, the owners informed the officers that she was with a new employee named Jennifer Seibert and provided them with her address and contact number. Soon, the investigators found Joleen's beige Ford Expedition on May 15th in the Home Depot parking lot in Yulee. They checked the surveillance footage to discover Jennifer walking from the parking lot and going into a nearby gas station after parking the car on May 13th at around 1:17 a.m. Suspecting she was involved, the police returned to the salon to learn she had not reported to her work ever since. Kimberly, who was going under the fake alias of Jennifer Seibert, was charged with first-degree murder in September 2018 and was also charged with 2 counts of battery on a law enforcement officer after allegedly stripping nude and flinging feces at them. As per the show, her antics inside the jail and court, including going on a hunger strike, were to be ruled mentally incompetent to stand on trial. However, she was found guilty of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole in December 2021. According to her inmate records, Kimberly is in her mid-50s and is serving her sentence at the Lowell Correctional Institution in Marion County, Florida.
What I think about is how my daughter Joleen was tortured. She suffered, and now we're suffering.
She said her daughter's death has damaged nearly every part of their lives.
These shocking reactions from female killers reveal just how unexpected and unnerving the human psyche can be. And yet, there are more stories that push the boundaries of the unimaginable. If you're ready for the next disturbing chapter, our next video will take you even deeper into the minds of those who committed some of the darkest acts.